This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Find great deals faster.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. This podcast is designed by real people on their journey to achieving financial freedom, and we'll focus on people who've either already attained it, who are joining us on that journey, or maybe a specialist topic that can help you build your technical knowledge to achieving and maintaining that financial freedom. We hope you enjoy it. Hello. Okay, so today's episode, we are focused on one of our expert areas. And what we do here in these episodes is we invite somebody to talk about a specific topic that they're a particular expert in that could and should help people on their journey to financial freedom. So today, we're going to be talking all things property. And I am delighted to be chatting with my co-host and business partner, Tim Witt. Tim's 18 years, isn't it? Construction
About
experience.
18 years.
Yeah. So 18 years construction experience, degree qualified construction and economics from Adelaide. I don't know whether those qualifications count over here, but we'll say they do. And then
Rich certified because we do some of our reports.
yeah, they do. But more importantly, has been doing lots of construction activity in the corporate world, but now focused in the last 5 years on building his own portfolio and helping others to build theirs. So today's episode is one of our 5 key topics of our process, Build Better, which is about how we find our builders, how we engage our builders, and hopefully you'll learn something from this to help you gain knowledge in a way that you can go out and find good builders, you can get a good build process, which is pretty much everything to do with what happens before the build starts. So hopefully you'll take a lot of value from this, but let's crack on. And hello, Tim.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me, Phil. So yeah, I do think this is one of the key challenges that a lot of investors face when they're looking at buy, refurbish, refinance type projects.
It's one of the first questions we get, right?
Yeah, the build element is difficult and there's lots of things that can go wrong. So yeah, hopefully I can provide some valuable insight to this. So just to kick things off, so how do you find a good builder or a good panel of builders? So I like to say a good panel of builders because you might find one builder, but what happens if he folds his
because one of the first things when our clients come on board, I said, "Will you find me 3 quotes?" Right?
Yeah,
and it's like, well, okay.
you want some decent competition as well. So just to start, like how do you find these people? So I think some initial things you can do is networking. Referrals and recommendations is probably the best way to get some of these contacts of the builders to get on board. So network with other property investors, ask recommendations to them. But the only thing you do need to consider is like sometimes that property investor has got a really good builder, they've got a really good relationship with, they've built it up over years and years, and they might keep them busy. So are they just going to give you that contact straight off the bat when you've had a 2-minute chat with them? Probably not.
And you've also got to be careful on referral. I think you've got to be really careful because people there's a natural helpfulness about people, right? Yeah. So if I ask for a referral, if I put it into like a WhatsApp group, that's different. So if I ask for a referral in a WhatsApp group, my mate John does building, they'll just go, oh yeah, you need to speak to John. Yeah. But the question you need to ask then is, well, have you ever had John do any work for you? Yeah. You know, and quite often the answer is no.
Sometimes you need to be very, very specific. It's like, have you used them and would you recommend them for this type of project? Yeah. You know, because like, you know, building contact, you know, there's different ranges of things that they can do and stuff like that. But that is a way to build up some contacts. Obviously, like you have other members of your power team. So let's say you get a project manager on board. That project manager, if he's working on, say, HMO conversions, he would have done a lot of these projects before with lots of different builders. So he will have naturally a lot of contacts and he'll know who's well priced, does a good job and things like that. So that's a really good contact straight away. Other members, like you've got people like brokers, planning consultant and architects, all those sort of people that work, if they're doing similar types of projects, they will know some of the builders as well. So you can get referrals and recommendations.
Yeah, that's a good point, that because brokers have to put, you know, when you're doing a deal, right? So when you're doing a bridging deal or a development deal, when it comes to actually raising the finance company wants to know the builder. Yeah. So they're forever asking who the builders are, right? The brokers, the finance brokers. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and some of our brokers come to our sites quite regularly and they do see the works and things like that as well. So, and also you can meet builders at networking events. So sometimes it could be a property event that they'll come along to, but a lot of the times it's at other networking events where service providers go to for, say, development networking and stuff like that. There's networking events.
Well, we go to events just to meet builders, don't we?
Yeah, there's like BNI and there's one called Grafters in Manchester, example, where they have different professions that come in, and some of the professions are builders who are looking for those sort of work. So you can meet them in that as well. And again, from other people in those networks, they may know them, and you can build up some contacts from that.
So one thing I'll point out here is at no point have you said look on the yellow pages. I know it doesn't exist anymore, but look on the phone book or
I don't. You can go to some sites like My Builder and ones like that. You can do that.
I don't trust those sites,
but you got to be very conscious that like a lot of people, even if they got good ratings on their reviews,
just be their mates, right?
It's just their mates or the family members or whatever and things like that. So you need to be very careful. But you can find them on that. It's not saying they're not there.
So when I had a company that did Trustpilot, and I think they've closed this down now, but when a company that had Trustpilot, people would approach us and say, we are a Trustpilot company, and we will build you a review panel. So they would literally go away and get 20 people from a location overseas normally. And just do like 1,000 reviews or whatever. Overnight,
sometimes with those builders, like our good builders that we have, they're not on those because they don't need to, because they get a lot of referrals and recommendations anyway. So
our builders don't have websites.
They don't have websites. They don't need it. So that's the thing, but it doesn't mean that you can't find them. But
it's a good point, because if somebody comes to us and says recommend your builder, we're not going to do that.
And that's because they're busy, and we've spent a lot of time getting into that process, and we really, really value them, and we don't want to just pass them on to anyone as well. Sometimes if people we have really good relationships with that we know well and trust, sometimes we do pass on contacts for it, but it is.
I think it brings us to our next point as well, which is the reason we don't do that. One of the reasons we don't necessarily do that is because it then comes down to how good you are. Yeah. Right. You are ultimately responsible for your build program, right? You are.
Well, that's a fair point. We probably should have kicked that off. But as the property developer, you're basically responsible for everything until you delegate, and then also you're responsible for whoever you delegate to, basically, because you're the developer. So anything that happens on that site, delays, health and safety problems, cost increase, all these sort of things, ultimately it just comes back to the developer at the end of the day. So you're just delegating that through a contract with a builder. So probably the last way, you can get online recommendations as well. So sometimes we do a lot of developments, which are conversions to co-living HMOs. If you specifically go on sites where there's like the HMO group is a good one online, where that you can get good recommendations from people.
If it's out of area or something like that,
if it's out of area and stuff like that. So
you can come to our networking event.
You can get that, or you come to our networking event as well. But so let's say you built up, you might get 5 or 10 building contacts from that. What do you do next to make sure they're suitable? So the next real step is like a due diligence process, I call it, but I like to always be specific about what that actually means, because people say, "Oh, do you due diligence?" And I was like, "Well, what do you?"
You can say that really well. I don't know what it is in my brain. So when you just rattled that off, then do you due diligence? I have to think about those words, because do due diligence. I can't
it's your language. It's your language, English. So I don't know why you struggle with it. But
I say I can't do it. But yeah, well done. Anyway,
so I think to kick it off from there, you got those. Let's say you got 5, 10 contacts of potential builders that could work on your scheme. So you want to catch up with them for a coffee and find out some really key information, like what's their company name, who are the directors. You want to check them out on Companies House, have a look at their online accounts. You can actually do credit file reports and stuff like that. That will give you a bit of info. Builders are notorious for shutting down opening companies and things like that. Sometimes they put their wife as director for whatever reason. So but all that does is it gets you an understanding. Then you can just ask the builder or the contractor as to why that is the case or whatever, without attacking him. But it just gives you a bit of background on it. Obviously,
none of those things in isolation are necessarily negative, by the way. Just because a builder's got their wife as the company's house, you might have another company that it's a tax efficiency point of view.
Yes.
But if he doesn't want to talk about it.
The red flag is the lack of discussion.
Or if he's got 8 companies that he's dissolved. You can. That's why it's in his wife's name. That's different.
Why have you shut down 8 companies? Sometimes I say, I'm just trying to avoid VAT or something like that. Who knows? But at least it creates a discussion point, and you've done a bit of background check.
One of the things that I saw was I met a guy, and let's say I'll just pick a name. So let's say it was Stephen John as an example. So I'm not going to use the real name. And then it was a different person in the company. It was his wife. And his wife's name was, let's say, Linda Joan. As an example. So I asked him, well, why, if that's your wife, how come you've got different surnames? And he was and ahhing and ahhing. And he said, oh, well, actually, John's not my actual surname. Right. And then I put into that his first name and his wife's surname, and he had 11 companies that dissolved. So he'd actually not given me his right name. Yeah.
Yeah,
so just
by doing that check, you sort of work that out. So that's another good thing. And obviously, you can look them online if they, what are their websites? Are there any reviews online?
Yeah. Some of them aren't limited as well. They're they're
some
not
are
limited
sole traders, but you can also look them up on social media. Obviously, that's the modern way to look up people on Facebook and things like that. And just see what they're like, see what their comments are like. Sometimes you just get a bit of understanding, but
I'd also take feedback with like a bit of a pinch of salt. Because everybody likes to say negative things. We're quite a negative race. So just because one build program's gone badly doesn't mean the other one.
Yeah, I'll get onto that a bit when I talk about references. But so some other background checks or the other things that you want to do is ask about the team, that their business and their team. Because basically, what we want to do, we want to find the right builder for the right price who would deliver the works to the right quality on time and on budget. That's basically what we want. So there's no point. I'm
trying not to laugh here because you said we want to know about the team, and then it just every time you mention this, it's like it always brings me back to One Tooth John. One Tooth John, who was one of our builders team. I got called out by the fire brigade on a Saturday night because he'd been using a petrol-driven saw in a club.
He's a key member of that team. But anyway, so what I mean by like checking out a team is like, and you want the right sort of contract for the right job. So what we generally ask is like how many contractors or subcontractors or tradesmen have you got in-house that are directly employed by you? Because what we find is for our size project, someone's got 20 or 30 guys on the books. They got to pay the salaries and got brand new vans and things like that. If things do go wrong and there's price escalation materials like we had during COVID, they've had too much work and they've got fixed price and all these sort of things. When they're losing money and they've got to pay 20 or 30 wages and vans, that is a key indicator that business is going to be in big trouble.
It's funny because there's a balance, isn't there, between employees and contractors. So it's a very, very valid point, and people get this the wrong way around. They say, oh, well, this person employs 20 people. Well, that's a good thing. But that means he has to pay 20 people every month.
It's higher risk, I see, for our
size of projects, which is sort of your 100 to 150 grand.
And then on the flip side, if we're doing... if you just use the price range of say 60K up to like 200 for a development conversion project, if there's like a builder that's a bit of a handyman that does a lot of work himself and he might just employ an electrician and plumber as a subby, probably not going to be big enough to do that range project. You're probably doing 60K less, your house refurbs and things like that, great for that, but not quite big enough for those. But then a builder that's got a big team that you mentioned or a bigger office, stuff like that, their overheads are probably going to be too high.
At the same time, if you are more experienced and that person has done a really good job for you and they want to step up, we have to build a step up, right?
They might need to bring in a couple of extra people to help. Whatever.
We can recommend a separate subby or whatever or that kind of thing. So,
but it's good to have core teams that use job to job because they know what to do and they're familiar with the works. But
if you're doing it for the first time, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, completely agree. So. You want to ask them what sort of projects they do, because you might have got this referral, but they might not actually be suitable for what you're doing. They might be either too big or too small, like we mentioned. So you want to see that their niche is similar to what you're after. And the main thing for that is that they'll deliver your project to the right quality with the right team, but also their pricing point's going to be right.
Usually in the team as well, you kind of want those multi-skilled people, don't you? A little bit of joinery, a little bit of tiling,
guys,
that kind of stuff. Whereas they're outsourcing their specialist items normally, the electrical work, the fire alarm systems and stuff like that you might need. Normally they're not the core team. The core team, they'll do they might do the strip out, but they'll also do some of the joinery work. They'll also do some of the tiling and maybe even some of the painting or whatever.
Maybe some decorating.
That's the kind of thing for our scale of development. If you're doing a HMO or a service accommodation unit, certainly that's the kind of team you're looking for, really, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think the next key thing is, so once you get through those checks and you decide, these guys sound suitable for what we're doing, I think the next key checks after that are you want to go and visit some of their completed projects, see what their quality is like. Obviously, that's a good indicator because the client they work with is happy for you to go visit their their site and all those sort of things. So that's one positive indicator if that happens, and then you can see the workmanship while you're there. I think you also want to ask you to visit some of their existing sites to see what they're doing. Is it similar sort of work? How do they manage their sites? What's the housekeeping like? Does it look safe? And all those sort of things. You can learn a lot just by walking around some of their sites. If it's a real mess and no one's there and all those sort of things, sometimes that can be a bit of a negative indicator. And also just ask for some references for clients.
Previous clients.
So obviously if they don't give you, that's a bit of a red flag. If they do, that's tick number one. And then also what you do find, I've had this quite a lot, is people are quite honest, because you're just talking to them verbally. It's not recorded or anything. It's just they will give you the honest, and it's like you said. It's like, oh yeah, this project did finish behind, but to be honest, like I've talked to the guy and he's been like, yeah, I was changing stuff and asking him to redo things and everything. I was a bit of a pain, so I probably would have finished on time if I did things differently, which will lead on to a bit of our later discussion about the tender and design process and stuff like that. So yeah, so I think, you know, once you get through that process and you've done all those checks, you will have a pretty good idea if that builder is going to then be suitable to quote your jobs.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to that point, right?
Yeah. Because I think what happens, a lot of people, they'll skip all those points.
Why we exist.
I've got a contact now. You can come quote it, and I'll just take him out to the site.
Yeah.
So when like you've got these builders and you're happy for them to price after all that due diligence, because if you don't want to waste their time, if they're not suitable, don't get them to price. You're just going to waste their time
and yours
and ours, exactly, and yours. So So the next key thing is like we said before, you want to be a really good client to work with, and you want to provide the builder with everything they need to deliver as good a job as possible, as quickly as possible, and efficiently as possible. So they make money, you make money. It's a win-win-win for everyone.
And so you want your builder to be profitable.
Yeah.
You want your builder to be profitable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know?
Everyone wins. So what that means is do not get a builder and take him to the site and just start rattling off some things that you want. He's not even writing them down, or he's got to scrunch that bit of paper that's half wet that's in his car because he's spilt coffee on it or whatever. Because that just won't work. You need to, as an investor or developer or the project manager, you need to detail exactly what's required. So the drawings, so the process we do is architectural drawings, but building regulation drawings, which include everything on there. And also you need to check that to make sure that the architects put on there everything you want. So you know, some things we've talked about recently is we want 3 levels of lighting in a room. So, you know, we want pendants, we want sunspots, we want some ambient light, stuff like that. So like, you know, is that on there? Are the socket locations shown? Is furniture layout, how you'd want it? You know, all the services requirements. And then you want a detailed specification that has insulation build-ups that comply with building regs, has the fire doors, has the fire alarm panel requirements, all those sort of things, really detailed from a technical perspective and a layout perspective.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually, because that's your architect as well, right? That's not even you at this point. So you want your architect to also understand the regulatory environment for the licensing requirements for what you're building.
Yes,
you know, because if they've done 20 new build projects back to back, and then they come do a HMO, they may not be 100% on,
or they're not doing it continually. So you might actually know the rules better than them, and also, but you want to deliver what you want to deliver, so you have to have a checklist for them of key requirements and review it and go back to them with any comments. And then further to that, you need a detailed, you know, scope of works or schedule of works that it gets called a lot. So you don't want to regurgitate what's on the drawing. So if the drawings say the wall build-up's this to achieve the fire rating insulation, it's on the drawing. You don't need that, or it's on the specification, which is also needed from the architect as well. What you will want to do is, like, let's say the windows need replacing, or the roof needs a re-roof or a refelt or some flashings or things like that. It's more specific things like that.
Yeah.
But generally cover each trade package and what's needed to do. You
don't want to go too far. Right,
it's a real
balance, isn't it? I think balance is the right thing. Because if you've got your drawings that show where your plug sockets are and all the elements that you want to be included, and you've given them a design package which includes this is the finishing schedule that we want, and then you put the scope of works. I mean, for demolition, as an example, or strip out, you don't then want to be going, I want, you know, three things taken down, that kind of stuff. You just want to say, right, to be able to meet that criteria.
What you may want to do is, like, if you've got a straight wall where the chimney breast does come out, it might show the dashed line on the drawing, but you want to make it clear in your scope, like, yes, please demolish and remove all chimney stacks, because they may miss that dashed line. It's not that obvious, even though it's sort of shown on the drawing. So things like that are important.
And one of the really good lines to use is make good the area whenever you're doing a scope of works, right? So it's a really good line to use because it leaves enough scope that if it comes back to you later in the line, you can say, I told you to make good the area.
Yeah.
You know?
And a finished product. So then the next layer to that is like, we look at the room data sheets and finishes specifications.
That's data for everyone else. Data sheets. Yeah.
Room data sheets. Yeah. I do sort of mix it up these days. I try and conform with the local lingo. But so the room data sheets will have things like your, you know, how many sockets in a room. So if it's not specifically shown in the drawings, we'd be like, you know, in this room, we're allowing for 4 double sockets, we want Stelrad type white radiators and things like that, a bit more of the technical mechanical and electrical type requirements. And then the finishes schedule should have everything you need to build out that product. So your paint colors, your paint finishes, which walls are getting painted with what color, your floor.
It's your brand standard as well, isn't it?
Yeah, like we have a brand standard, and then we tweak it from job to job. But so we know exactly what we want, and that gives you security price. So you know your budgets. Also, the builders that do a lot of jobs, they know exactly what's required. There's not a lot of guesswork.
Yeah.
But yeah, every bit of element. So like your door handles, your door types, your skirting board size and types.
Door handles are really important, right?
Architraves, your door closers, even like your thumb turn, because we missed out on one spec thumb turns, and we got one that we didn't like. It didn't work very well. So now we've updated our spec to make sure that's covered.
Yeah, because like the little things, it's really minutiae stuff that gets you. Like the normal door handle isn't compatible with a fire door.
Yeah.
Because it's too weak.
Yeah.
So you have to go with a specific type.
Yeah.
To be able to, because the fire doors are heavier than your average door. So if you don't have the right handle, within 3 months, you're gonna have the handles coming off the wall. So it's little things like that you need to be really clear on.
Second fix finishes, so your plumbing finishes, the shower type, the shower tray, the shower screen, the toilet, the type for all these sort of things. Because the kitchen design, like exactly what it is, the tiling on the walls. If you don't specify these things, the builder that's pricing it will price something which is almost guaranteed to be the cheapest thing in the market, because obviously they want to make a profit, and we completely understand that. And if you don't spec something, kitchen example, what's the cheapest? It's going to be a white door with a black granite laminate top, and that's what it's going to be. So you're thinking of something else, and they're pricing something else. So there's going to be variation costs if it's not specified properly, or if you haven't designed it fully at that point in time when you're getting the price, put what's called a prime cost sum, a PC sum. So if you haven't finished the design yet, haven't had time
prime or provisional.
They're two different things.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. So prime cost is for like something that's not quite designed.
Right.
So like a kitchen, an example, haven't designed it, but we're definitely going to do it. So it's a prime cost. We're saying this is £7,000 for the kitchen.
Okay.
A provisional cost is usually something from the contractor. They're like, we think we need to do this, but we're not entirely sure what we need to do.
Okay.
So that's a slight difference.
Interesting.
People mix up those terms, but yeah, if you're
they could have chosen 2 letters of the alphabet though, couldn't they? Because in our
it's a prom sum and a PC
sum. It's like
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so you need all that stuff. This is your tender pack I'm talking about, and everything you need to give to a builder at a price. An invitation to tender where you sort of lay out and dictate what the time frame is for pricing.
Stop the podcast now. This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Property Filter is the #1 property tool for today's property professional. It brings in all the data points and sources from all the property portals and auction sites into one convenient place. Then you have the option to overlay all the clever strategies found in the Property Filter blueprint to find motivated sellers faster. Now, we use it on a daily basis. It saves us over 80% of our time when looking for properties. And if that sounds like something that you want in your lives, please go to register.property-filter.co.uk/PPB, which is the discount code for this podcast. You will get 2 weeks free and a discount on your first month. That's it from me. Back to the podcast.
And the issue is really simple. If you don't have your building regs drawings, you don't have your data sheets, you don't have your FF&E schedule, and you don't have your scope of works, which is detailed enough to be able to read it. You invite 3 builders down, you're going to get 3 different prices.
Yeah, you can't compare apples for apples because they've priced different things. There might be a real variance in price. You don't know why. Whereas sometimes, like if we've got sort of 3 key builders we go to price, sometimes they're literally within £500. Because
and this is genuinely why so obviously we get paid to do this, right? So this is what our clients pay for. And we say to our clients, by the time the build is started, you've saved the money that you pay for us.
Definitely.
Right? 100%.
Yeah.
Because because we've seen some wild stuff, right? So like we got, so a project that we delivered recently was about 126K on the build cost. We were getting quotes at 150K by, third party introduced builders.
Other builders that we weren't familiar with.
Because they didn't understand what we did as an organization.
Yeah, and some of them go off and price what they want to price, don't they? Even though we've done the finishes specification.
And then you've got to take into account
the
risk of the build as well.
Yeah, it's mitigation of variation. So if your scope and your finishes schedule is really detailed, then at that point it's really sort of unforeseens or things that crop up during the build that you could get charged for.
And those things do exist.
Yeah,
we've had some, right? So typical.
Yeah, so like some typical things we have, because we're doing refurbishments of old buildings basically. So sometimes you'll do a strip out on the floorboards and the joists underneath to be rotten from water that you can't see.
Yeah.
things like that. So I've had to do things like replace that. Sometimes there's been structural movement that's not visible until you do the strip out. So then you have to do
internal wall rather than
strapping,
external wall. Yeah.
You might have to put some extra steel supports in and things like that.
Yeah, because that's the issue. A lot of the roof, the houses have two walls, right? So they have two, and then they have room for insulation or whatever.
Yeah.
And your external wall, when you take your photos, might be fine, but your internal wall might have moved.
Yep.
So you have like these structural cracks, and you have to tie it back, or you have to, repair it,
things like that. Yeah. And then sometimes roof's a difficult one because like you think when you go and do initial site visit, you might have 20 minutes and you're trying to check as many things. You can't actually get up in the loft space and check the roof. So sometimes they're filtered or not filtered. So, we'll go back and do these checks best we can, but sometimes there's some complete unforeseens. That
an unfelted roof isn't necessarily the worst thing.
No.
But it has to be watertight.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And if you don't do your roof checks, that's a problem.
Key thing. And then obviously we look at things like windows and doors if they need replacing, any subsidence and things like that as well. That it's really key checks need to check. And obviously that will mitigate the risk of variations, and what's a fair contingency type budget to have in place.
Yeah, because if you don't have these things in place, but you've given yourself a 10% contingency, which is the recommended contingency, your 10% contingency goes. If it's 100k job, you got 10k contingency.
Yeah.
If you haven't got your full scope of works, you haven't given the data sheets, that 10k is not enough.
But let's say you get a quote from a builder at 90k and it's all magnolia white walls and a white kitchen, and you think it's something completely different. It's a high spec,
funky high spec code.
So you're going to get variations of 20 odd grand for design changes that you're implementing because you thought they priced something differently. And then you've got the risk of unforeseen. So you got the double whammy.
Yeah, and as we said at the start, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Because you haven't been clear with the builder. It's not their fault. And the one thing that I always hear is the builder complaining about the builder.
Yeah.
It's like, the builder's done this, the builder's not. No, the builder hasn't done any of those things.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, there are bad builders, but I tell you what, there's more bad clients.
Yep.
Who don't.
If you give them everything they need, and then they fail, then you can sort of go, well, actually, I've given everything they need. We've agreed a contract and all these sort of things. Because
it's funny because we've got a builder
they become unfinancial. It's sort of like what else can be done?
So we've got a builder that's done a job for another company that we actually know, and I spoke to him 2 days ago, and I said, how did you find the build program with this particular builder? And he said, it's been really difficult. And we've had challenges with this particular builder, but none that are unsurmountable. You'll know who I'm referring to, but I'm not going to name them. But they're not unsurmountable. But it's because we knew that they were stepping up to do this work.
Yeah.
And we were really on it. So our project managers are there more often. We're having more conversations with them.
Yes.
We're making recommendations how they can improve their business. We're giving them subcontractors that they can use. We haven't just left them to it.
And even the first project we did, we had some terms that were probably a bit more stringent just to make sure.
Yeah, because we took a bond on, didn't we?
Yeah, and we covered the risk of our client because we hadn't worked with them before and stuff like that. And then after he delivered that, we relaxed it a bit more.
It's a good point, right? So as part of our tender processes, we don't pay up front.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk about payment terms, but that will probably move on to where I'm getting at. So that's a tender pack, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you include things like existing photos and videos of the site and a bit of an outline program as well as the tender time frame and when we're going to start on site. And you also want to recommend in an invitation tender is like, we're going to do a site visit on this date at this time. Please make yourself available to meet me there, and then they can visit the site and have a look around in an efficient way and see if you can. Yeah, so they completely understand what's required as well as the tender pack. So once you've done that, you got your prices in, then you sort of need to make sure you're reviewing apples for apples or any exclusions, inclusions, exclusions that are slightly different. So if someone, as an example, priced a re-roof, the other one hasn't, you need to find that value to assess apples for apples. Someone, windows as well, another example, if someone's priced to replace them, but the other one hasn't.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because one of all that's happened sometimes there is the builder's got a roofer to come out and they've took one look and gone, it needs a re-roof.
Yeah.
Because if you ask a roofer to come and look at your roof, the first thing they're going to say is, it needs a re-roof.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't want to do the little bit of jobs, right?
Exactly.
So it sometimes means that the builder themselves hasn't got the right roofer.
Yeah.
Because they might be a third-party contractor themselves. So you've got to just be aware of those things.
Sometimes what you can say to the builder is like, if you're going to price these things that aren't on the scope, just put them as like a separate line.
Yeah.
So you got like the re-roof is $7,000, but I haven't included my main quote.
Yeah.
And then, you can weigh it up, apples for apples, can't you? And then you know where you're at. So you might want to, let's say you've got 3 quotes, you might want to go, all right, these 2 are pretty similar. Both of them could win the work, but I need to clarify in detail exactly what's included, excluded.
Yeah.
We do what's called an interview checklist. So we go through key inclusions, exclusions to completely see the scope and what that means for what.
Yeah. So once we've got the quote, we meet the builder.
Yeah.
Right? You meet to go through it.
Oh, definitely. Right. Yeah. And then, so you get to a point where that you can agree a contract sum. So typically, like our build contracts include everything bar furniture supply, but it even includes like hanging up the furniture requirements. And what I mean is like curtains, artwork, things like that. They're ready to go. So they've actually priced
TV brackets
to do everything, TV brackets, etc. And it's all done, cleaned, ready to go. And then we just have
good point. Cleaners at the end.
Yeah. We're now getting specialist cleaners in because the builders do a relatively all right clean, but not quite what would you call a sparkle clean.
Yeah.
So yeah, things like that, and then that's the contract sum. That's what you're going to do it to, and then the only variation at that point is if we change the design element, or if there's an unforeseen thing that crops up that we didn't know about, the builder didn't know about, and it's like, that's an extra cost. Some of the things I mentioned before. So you want to agree the proposed time frame. When can they start on site? Because if you need to start in 2 or 3 weeks, but they are not available for 3 months, that's not going to work. If their program will work, so you want a bit of a Gantt chart week by week to show what they're going to do. Is one builder 20 weeks, the other's 35?
Why is that different?
Why is that different, and why is that the case? And what would you agree to sign up? Because there's obviously time constraints in building all the time.
And I think that's the balance of when to start the tender process as well, right?
Yeah.
So, because a lot of people don't want to spend any money or any energy or any time until a purchase of a property is complete. Because normally we're buying something to then renovate it.
Yeah.
We move it forwards. We move the dial forward. So ideally, because our cost is normally development cost, right? So if you borrowed money or whatever to do the development work, so we try and start that process up to 2 months in advance, right?
I think it's really important, especially if people are using bridging development finance. It's a little bit of cost risk up front, but I think it's more of a risk not to do it, because if you don't do it up front pre-purchase, then you've got 2 or 3 month process with the bridging finance in place.
And your true cost at that point is your architectural cost.
Yeah, and
that's your true cost.
And some project management
as well. Project management if you've got project manager. And then so you're looking at a couple of grand, aren't you, up front? Sunk cost.
Or a few grand, yeah.
Yeah. And then but your cost of not doing that is your bridging cost.
Yeah, your bridging cost at 16-17% or something worked out straight away. So the risk reward in that circumstance is heavily outweighed to do it up front, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously we give our clients option, but predominantly
we've only had one pull out in our time as well.
Yeah,
so.
Pretty much everyone's just been happy to get it done before. There is a slight risk that occasionally,
the vendor doesn't sell it to you.
Vendor doesn't sell it to you or something like that.
Or title query or something like that.
So that can happen on occasions, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's worth taking that risk. So other things you can talk in our interview checklist we talk about, it's like you said, payment terms.
Payment terms, absolutely. 100%.
So we've had, usually we do that bit of the due diligence to see what their payment terms are, to see if because some builders who don't hold a lot of cash flow, they might want 30% deposit up front. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work for a lot of the projects we work on because of the way they're funded, and we got to protect the risk.
It's a massive thing, and I see it all the time where someone's got a development loan, which is paid in arrears. So you bridge your development loan, if you're using a bridging lender, is paid in arrears. So you have to prove the work's done before they will give you your drawdown. Then your builder wants paying after 2 weeks. Your first drawdown's not for 4 weeks, and then you've got another week for their monitoring surveyor to come out, and then 72 hours for their SLA for them to pay you the money.
But also be very clear up front how it's funded with the builder.
Yeah.
So if you say, look, it's on bridging finance, they can draw it. We can pay once the works are done, once the surveyors come out. Like you said, there's a bit of a process for them to come out and get the drawdown. But after 4 weeks, you do an application, you should get paid on week 5.
You should have a pot anyway, right?
Yeah,
just in case. It's
like any business should have a cash flow pot anyway to build up and cover these.
But that's not necessarily to pay the main part of your contract. That's the point. It's not to pay the 30% up front is always a risk. You know that. So anyway,
but you definitely have to discuss it and agree it, because it can cause problems, and it does happen to a lot of investors. And I hear stories all the time. And obviously VAT is another one. So for a lot of the conversion projects we do, the VAT is 5%.
Yep.
Because you're changing use. If you're not changing use, so if you're refurbishing like a 2-bed terrace or 2-bed terrace, replacing the kitchen and bathroom, I'm pretty sure it's 20% for that as an example. Some builders will just charge 20 regardless, knowing it's 5. So it's just something to be careful. But but generally it's 5%. Also, you need to see they're VAT registered, because you can't pay in VAT if they're not VAT registered. You shouldn't be paying VAT if they're not VAT registered. So that's
but if they're not VAT registered and you're 100 grand is your build total for that you're paying them, then they only have to invoice 80. Oh, it's 90 now. Is it 90?
Yeah, that's true.
In a year.
So pretty much that.
So if they're not VAT registered, I'd be asking them why.
Yeah,
and then
why?
I'd be back on company's house looking for those companies that have gone under.
do that check. No,
that's playing the piano.
That's a fair point. So some other things to discuss. So like defects liability period. Yeah. So once the contractors finish the works, if there's any defects that come up for their workmanship, there should be a defects liability period and a retention on their money. So we hold back 2.5% for 6 or 12 months, depending on the builder.
Yep.
And they come back and fix the work. I mean, they will come back and fix anyway, but just holding that bit of retention.
They will, but to a degree.
To a degree, yeah.
Sometimes it's better to hold that and just be also, because if you don't have a defects liability withholding and you are reliant upon the builder to come back, if you do have a defects liability holding, you can say to the builder, look, I've got this money.
It's a lot more leverage.
If you don't want to come back and fix this leaking cistern, I can get somebody locally,
pay a plumber to come in,
but it's going to be invoiced to you against that value, and I'll pay them out of that pot. Because the builders have moved on, and ideally it's onto your next job as well, so they're doing something big. So
and if they are too busy with their plumbers, then they might just be happy if you to get a maintenance guy who's reasonable.
Because you want to be turning that around really quick as well. You don't want like a newly converted property with a leak.
So it shows lots of reasons why that's important. So things like during the build process, are there any approvals you need with the contractor or for materials and sign off and stuff like that? A bit of a schedule for that. Sometimes good to talk through. Process for agreeing variations. So if things crop up, there are variations. It's like that needs to be relayed to your project manager or you straight away. Decide what to do, how it's going to be priced, get a price for it, or sometimes you can agree day rates and stuff like that. But just the process for how that's going to happen agreed up front. And then really...
so they need to bring the variation to you, number one.
Yeah.
They can't just bill you for a variation.
What happens sometimes is that these things aren't agreed with investors. The builder gets to the end of the job and go, I've got these 15 things that, I didn't price originally. It's going to be 27 grand or something. It's like, what? Didn't even know about it and no budget for it, whatever. And then the builder gives the investor a hard time saying, I need to get paid on Tuesday for those now. And obviously that doesn't work. You need a budget for it, but you should have a contingency in place anyway.
Variations do happen. They do happen on nearly every
to
some degree.
Yeah, especially even as rock solid as your contract, because so we use a JCD minor works contract with some design responsibility for electrical and mechanical with the contractor. But what it does is you don't have a all risk price because they're pricing competitively. So you get a good price because they're not allowing a huge contingency. They might have a little bit of a contingency themselves, but not a huge contingency. Whereas if you had it all included, their price is going to be higher, but then you won't get any variations. So overall, you're better this way for these sort of projects, I believe. But
if you're going big, you want all risk, right?
Some really big developments, like where it's a design and build contract and it's like a guaranteed price, it's there still are variations, to be honest, because that's what I used to do for a job. But
they employ somebody just to do those.
But they're new
build variations, right?
They're new build and stuff like that. So usually it's design changes that relate to those sort of those variations, whereas everything else is covered basically, and the builder is responsible for all the design and the build. So you can do those, but obviously the risk gets factored into the pricing, so you need to weigh that up. You also need to talk about like handover documentation. So everything you need at the end of a project, like gas safety certificates, fire alarm certificates,
fire alarm,
electrical certificates, all these sort of documents that you need for a handover. Even like a bit of a manual on like this is how the boiler system works, the heating system works. Some of the stuff we do is fairly basic, but some bigger developments you want.
One thing we're really bad at is and we're getting better at it, is activating the warranties.
That's a fair point.
That's you, not them.
Asking for all the contacts for it. Even like hobs and ovens and stuff like
the
that.
oven, my fridge is broke within a year, it's under warranty, and then you realise you had to actually ring to activate the warranty. That's your responsibility, not the builder's, and no one's done it.
We've added it onto one of our checklists, haven't we, for that reason. Again, it's your responsibility, so things like that. But handover requirements really important. And you want a bit of a snagging sign-off type process at the end of the project. So agree that with the builder that you or your project manager will do a defect/snagging review and agree what's required in a reasonable way.
And
so they get done.
Our advice is if you're then not self-managing on that, is once you agree a snagging timeline and amount, tell whoever's letting your property these are still due.
Yeah,
because we've had it where we've done all the professional photos. the agents come to tenant it. They've got some wonderful tenants lined up. They walk in and the builder's in.
Yeah.
And they've made a mess or whatever, or they're fixing something and there's tenants walking around, and
it's a real
really
balance in investing because you want to get it done as quick as possible, get tenants in, but you want to get
communication
things sorted. It's communication is key, isn't it? But also the builder likes reasonable snagging because they don't want to get called back later because that's more of a hassle. So they'd rather have like a reasonable list, get it sorted quickly, and then they're like done and dusted with the job, bar any minor bits that come up.
Yeah.
But they don't want to leave thinking they're done and get 50 calls after. It's like, oh, this wasn't done. Oh, this decorating's not good. And it's like, why don't you just tell me that before and I would have sorted it out, even if you got that defects liability for it. Yeah. So again, it's just been...
They allow some time as well for that, right? So they allow some time to come back to site or be on site or whatever. So if you don't get it in the snagging and you sign it all off, then you can't expect them to come back really unless it's an actual defect. I think it's unfair to a degree.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things say, oh, well, I had a problem because I decided that this wasn't right or it didn't look right after a bit of time. And I'm like, well, it was right when you said yes.
Yeah.
So you need to then say everything's your fault.
And then it's weighing it up. So like we have a lot of old buildings, a bit of movement and stuff. So sometimes the door's catching. It's like...
Or a plaster crack.
Yeah. The building's just moved a bit. You can't blame that on the builder because when they put it in, it was fine.
Fire doors are the worst for that.
Yeah. The building moves.
Because the worst thing as well is like fire doors are worse for that because it's cold.
Yeah.
Property's cold, right? So when they're doing the build, they don't put the heating on there normally.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the end of the program, you stick the heating on, tenants start moving in, your license officer comes around and the doors are catching and things like that. And they say, oh, that's...
Yeah, so learn to that is get the heating on as early as possible without spending too much on the gas bills, basically.
Yeah. Because the doors expand, because obviously it's cold, it shrinks, if it's warm, it expands. And the fire doors are designed to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we get that. Point. Yeah. So I think that gets us to the point where we're saying we can get you into contract. We know the key terms, use a JCT minor works contract for these sort of projects. Yeah.
So add
in the specific information.
All of that is just getting ready to go and then planning for the end.
Yeah. Also, don't forget, this is probably a key important one for a lot of investors, that you need to do your health and safety checks beforehand. So we engage a principal designer to do the pre-construction checks for all the health and safety requirements. That's really important, pre-construction. And obviously throughout the project, but a lot of investors in this sort of space do not do that. And it's your risk. It opens up to a huge risk.
Principal designer is not your architect normally, or they can do it.
It can
be, but it's a separate contract. It's a separate thing. It's safety while on site. It used to be called CDM.
CDM used to be CDM management regulations, basically.
Yeah. So please do that. Absolutely.
So the idea of the principal designer is supposed to get that person involved in the design aspect, whereas the CDM was just like the build. So it's supposed to look at health and safety through design, through the build aspect. But yeah, really important to get that done. Obviously, your contractor needs their risk assessments and their safety files up to date for that check as well.
Which they are.
It is difficult in this space, but sometimes we've helped
having a helpful principal designer is helpful with that, right? Because they can help. They may have some standard documentation. They may help.
Yeah, and they can help the contract even in like separately. Just say like these are the things that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Even though like that you do that on site, but you need to document it as well because some builders just aren't great at documentation. Some of them like they actually work really safely and know what they're doing, but the documentation is just not up to scratch. So it's helping that as well sometimes.
Okay.
So that's the asbestos survey. That's a legal requirement. We have to get that done. I'm trying to think, is there anything else missed? Pre-construction.
Building control.
Yeah. So you need
warranty.
Building control. So really that happens pre-tender or tender process. You want building control on board so they can check the design and advise if there's anything that they want different or aren't happy with. Private certification is a good way to do it instead of council. Council you can do, but I find private are good to deal with. You want the building control check done pre-tender, the drawings, and then you want to talk about the inspections they're doing on site, so they're planned out. That's really important.
And then something that's becoming more prevalent is the warranty aspect, isn't it? So if you're doing something which is a true change of use, so if you're changing something which is commercial to residential, or you're doing something which is really upgrading a property.
Traditionally it used to be warranties for new build, and this is like the weird thing when I saw the refurbishment. I'm like, what, a warranty? It's like an old building, but we're just refurbishing it. But now lenders are asking for professional warranty. So,
and if you don't have one, it restricts your lenders for refinance. So if your plan is to refinance or to sell, either a buyer might want it because their lender might want it, or your lender might want it when you come to refinance.
And what we found is there's some companies that do these warranties, but also do building control. So you can sort of package it together and they do the checks at the same time. So sometimes that's a more cost-effective way of doing it.
Well, actually, that's just stopped. Just a challenge on that in the last few weeks. That's a brand new thing. So now you're, if you're doing the 6 year, it's called a 6 year PCC, which is professional consultancy.
You can't do building control.
Yeah, they are no longer offering a packaged building control thing because the building control regs that changed on the 21st of March.
And it's changing that quick, isn't it? So
it changes all the time. So there's two, isn't there? There's 6 year and 10 year, and it depends on which one is best for you at the time. Yeah, but speak to your broker about that, about your exit.
Yeah,
because they will advise which one's best for you. You know?
We'll flip back to the absolute start, and the one thing we didn't talk about is it's really important to get your budgets right in the first place. So the estimate in your first appraisal is really important, but we can go into more detail on that in another session. But I think basically that gets us to the building contract being in place. Make sure you get it signed, signatures done, key requirements in place, and hopefully you never have to look at that contract and just gets done and dusted because everything's really clear. Like it's actually not, I don't even know if we basically never refer back to it because it's very clear up front what's required and it gets delivered to that. And sometimes there's holdups for various reasons. It's just like, that's happened. If there's a delay because of like unforeseen structural problems, just agree the extension with the builder. Just go, all right, that's held you up a week or two. We just give you an extra week or two. The contract date just
you give yourself a contingency in your timeline versus the builder's timeline.
Right? Because the contract is based on delivering it without changes and without variation. So if there is a variation that's legitimate, just agree it and get it done. Don't get to the end and go, oh, you're supposed to finish 16 weeks. It's 18 weeks. You owe me money now. Well, no. And then he goes, oh, but don't forget, I got held up because we had to replace the floor joists. So agree it at that point. So it's clear.
So it's clear,
Yeah, and then there's no surprise up front.
And then you're ready to
start the works.
Which sort of wraps up this session, because this session is really on building better is about pre-construction activity and what you do before that point, planning for the exit, planning for the end point. You know, we'll talk again.
And that's
on what happens next.
Yep.
Because everyone's focused on what happens next. Who's going to manage the project? Who's going to attend it? What do you do when you do there? All those types of things. Which is another session, I think, because it's a lighter touch, I think, but this is the important part, right? You get this part right. Yeah. Don't start until it's finished, which is a great and
there's lots of systems you can have in place to help with this, and lots of processes and the right team.
And the advice there is, while you're doing it, if you're creating something or you're doing something, if you can record it.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're having to do something on site and you're going through something with a builder and you build something, put it into a document.
Yeah.
You know.
Another key one is documenting as you go. So like with the EPC requirements or the new checks, if you got certain insulation that gets covered up, take a photo of it and document it so you can send it to them later.
I think that comes to the next part.
Yeah, that will come back to
we'll come back on the what to do when you're attending site.
Yeah. But we'll leave it at there today.
Good stuff. So there we go. So that's our build better pre-construction activities that will help you to A, find good builders, B, prepare for a good build tender process, and C, you set your site up for its greatest success. So I hope you enjoyed that. Really good to have you, Tim. Thank you very much. Your knowledge is obviously
thanks for having me.
Up there with anybody that I've ever met in this industry. So hopefully everyone's taken something away from that, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.